Hello, welcome everyone to today's interview. Very pleased to have Maya Zuckerman. How are you here today, Maya?
Hi, I'm doing great. It's almost evening here in San Francisco on a lovely fall day, autumn day.
Beautiful, and looks like you're in an amazing place with that background of yours, Maya. The future.
The future, where
That's
we're going to.
100%. So those that aren't aware, Dan Hendry is my name, founder of Unified Purpose, and some of you may have seen that very much focused on what's happening with converging exponential technologies and how that is applying to businesses, entrepreneurs, and just the life of people in general. So Maya and I, we actually have had several conversations. Maya was involved with a recent group interview which focused on sustainable business, living, and Industry 4.0 development, which is focused on these converging exponential technologies. And Maya's just a fantastic thought leader, doing a lot, heavily involved with a group that we're both involved with, which is the Open ExO community. Also does her own consulting, chief operating officer for Le Mans. Very much focused on changing the world through sort of circular economies and doing an MDA focused around that at the moment, and involved with a company called Regenibus, which was really focused on sustainability, which really aligns with where we're wanting to allocate a lot of our revenue sharing capital to, like affordable housing, smart and sustainable affordable housing projects around the world, which we also done a recent interview on, and you'll see a lot more of coming up. But as a brief introduction, I'll let Maya sort of take over and sort of explain a little bit more about those things I mentioned she's involved with, and then we can get into just a free-flowing conversation. Anyone that's watching this, feel free to post any questions throughout this, because we'll be on chat and able to answer those as well. Over to you, mate.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I definitely do a lot of advising roles. But my main work right now is with a group called Lumen.io. And we really look at the intersection between innovation and human capital. Because I've worked in many startups, tech startups mainly, and we've noticed that the issue that hinders implementing solutions is not our amazing minds and how much innovation and technology, it's actually people. And for us to actually solve the problems that are challenged with right now, especially around the climate crisis, but also other social issues, wealth inequality, etc. The issue is really people. And if we actually empower people to work on understand what the purpose of their company, but also their personal purpose, and then work together better, we can actually implement these solutions much faster. So our focus really is, we've got this new project called Creation Labs. How do we actually create rapid innovation while rapidly upskilling people and creating communities of trust and communities that have a shared purpose, communities and teams and organizations, and also have experience not only creativity, but also psychological safety. Because one of the most important things for us as we are trying to solve these issues is we don't come from the older mindset, that kind of more fixed mindset, but this exponential mindset. And there's all these different things that need to happen for that to happen. And actually the basic thing is you trust and you have accountability with the people you work with. So that's a lot of what we do. Regenibus is a group that I likely advise, and they are focusing on the sustainability around hemp and cannabis industries, which is, especially in the United States right now, we kind of we didn't have exactly a blue wave right now with the elections, but we had a green wave. We've had a lot of states legalize or decriminalize marijuana and other what used to be Schedule I drugs. So we've got that opportunity to bring in the sustainability around that. And yeah, I am doing a circular economy MBA out of the UK. And also I'm a content advisor for the Global New Mobility Coalition, which is a project as part of the World Economic Forum. And our focus is shared mobility, sustainable mobility, zero emission zones and areas and cities. And there's a lot of really interesting things coming in that field. And that's very much aligned with, circular economies and sustainability. So, but coming in from the kind of multi-stakeholder, public partnerships, large ecosystems perspective.
Yeah, that's all fantastic. So I think where we should start is maybe at the start in terms of that initial, for me, a couple of things, the Bold book with Peter Diamandis, and then also, funny enough, like Expert Secrets, which is more of a marketing sort of be the expert or be the reporter on any knowledge, but it definitely comes around to casting that vision and what is your culture, what's your cause. And as you know, with Unified Purpose, there's definitely a big cause, but the project's massive, cannot get done by someone like me on my own and you on your own. And it definitely takes a collective effort, but I think as we sort of talked about offline and you sort of alluded to then that, and I think there's this trend as well with the younger millennials to go ahead and set up, more impact-based social enterprises with more purpose, but maybe they're a bit more ingrained or wanting to go down that way with a, as I like to say, mate, or a bit of a kumbaya, let's just all work together. But I do feel that we need to find that balance between people that are part of this collective, but then they can have their own individual benefits because they've got to feed their families. They've got to have that security in what they're doing. So, so these are the sort of conversations we're having for anyone that's watching. And I'd like to really hone in, as we talked about offline, like for those that are not aware, we're bringing together the Unified Purpose plans, and it all starts with building a thriving community that's really tapped into your massive transformative purpose, which is the reason why your organization exists and the reason why other people are going to get involved and support that and build it together. So we're, as a group, working on revenue sharing type models, and we're setting up ExO Masterminds around 11 major attributes that need to be applied to any organization or community. So today, you're going to see a lot of content on all of those. Maya can touch on those as well. She's a certified ExO consultant. But for today, we're going to be focusing more on that massive transformative purpose, sort of community and crowd, which sort of then attaches to staff on demand for the initial expertise that you can get to come in and support the launch of any movement or business and community. And I think that's wherever we go from there. There's a couple of dashboards that we're going to show in terms, or Maya's going to demonstrate that we were going to talk about today. And just talk through how to plan the initial build of a community. I do suggest for anyone that is interested in what we're talking about, a great place to start is the Bold book, and then the Exponential Organisations book from Salim Ismail, and Bold's from Peter Diamandis. But yeah, over to you, mate. I think let's talk about that culture and the things like I mentioned before about this freemium type. Let's all work together, as opposed to how do we structure a circular economy just in masterminds, for example, in the community where we're doing it together, but we're getting what we all need to live, to hopefully, survive, live, and then end up thriving together.
Exactly. And it's such an important conversation, because I think a lot of times, and especially when we talk business, we forget the people. And people, like organizations are made of people. And people are the ones that move these ideas forward. So the removing, and it's very much kind of an old industrial revolution thing of just looking at everything as productivity and efficiency. And unfortunately, productivity and efficiency brought us to where we are right now. It's a wonderful world, but also we're in a crisis mode. So we need to use what we forgot, which is people, to actually solve this situation. Because if we just do it efficiently, we're not going to solve the problem. When we talk about culture at Lumen, we say the culture is in an organization is just how we do things here. And culture is something that usually, especially with startups, starts from the top, from the CEO and the founders and the executive teams. So if they actually don't take care in developing and creating that and fostering a healthy culture, it shows. And that's where we get toxicity and all these issues and fatigue, and we're all trying to get along, but nobody's actually holding what we call very much California concept of a container around the culture of, these are the rules of engagement. This is what we mean. Of course, at some point you bring in an HR department and they actually codify those, but there's something in between the HR department and actually what this kind of nebulous concept of a culture is. Which is symbols and the way we behave and archetypes and agreements and all these things that are not exactly just in the contract, but more about the day-to-day of how we are with each other. And it's really important when we build companies, but also when we build communities, that we actually have some rules of engagement of what is okay and what is not okay. I mean, social media, because we've allowed this kind of anonymity and just completely anything goes, that it's exploding and not in a good way. And the huge backlash, it's, I come from a place of like, actually, when we agree on it, regulations are really great. If we all agree on that, I mean, that's the concept of a social contract, right? We agree, this is how we behave together. So actually coming in to build a community and actually not thinking about it is a detriment, because then something happens and then you have to react instead of saying, this is how we work together. And, the behavior on social media, I mean, if people behaved on social media at work, the way they behave on social media at work, they'd be fired much faster. So there is we have agreements, but they're just unwritten and we just assume. But I think there is something about creating clarity that is really important, that, when I say this, I mean this, and we write that down, versus we all assume that this is how we need to behave. And it comes down to also, how we do things together. For instance, how we complete and work together. There's the RACI model, the responsible, accountable, consulted, and forgot the fourth one, and informed. So if we actually don't tell people what the roles and responsibilities are, they don't know what to do. And then actually that stops them. Even in a community where people are not being paid, if you actually say, hey, we need a few people to do just this, and we needed to do it from this day and that day, and here's how you do it, things are going to move much faster versus who wants to do 20 things. And then there's always going to be the 3% that are gung-ho, they're going to do it, and then it starts tapering out, right? So there's ways of thinking about it, but I think the what I'm noticing is people want to just create something, and then it's the I don't know if you've ever seen, it's a silly animation from South Park, the underpants gnomes. People want to get a profit and they want to get to things that work without actually doing their stage. The underpants gnomes had basically a business model that had 3 parts. Step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, there was nothing there. Step 3, profit. So I think people are forgetting the middle, the step 2, which is really important. Of when we say we want to create a community and they need to do something, are we defining it enough for people? Are we making it easy enough for people to actually jump on board and do something and make it? And also if you look at it from kind of the video game world, video games are structured in a way that the first few levels are really easy. So you actually feel like you get, I can just do this. Great. What's the next thing? And we don't create online communities like that. We just create them, and we and then we throw a bunch of content, and then we think that we have a community. And it's no, it's not. So I really want people to start reassessing when they say community, what do they mean? And they actually think about structuring a community, thinking about, all these different things. So anyways, how does that sound to you as a reflection of what needs to happen?
Yeah. And I think in terms of that blend between, I think what I've found and what I've seen, I think the knowledge business and these revenue sharing masterminds, which as you know, we're launching now and you'll be part of, is that happy medium between, people have got their own businesses and missions where that's their baby, that's close to their heart, that's what their lives in. So to then stop and then get involved with one community and then the next one, and there's lots popping up and there'll be lots more. I think it just comes down to that blend, and the best way is to just combine the knowledge, to be able to work together to work out those answers and the best practices with building a community. And having all the tools in one place. There's a lot of different tools and methods, you're about to show a couple that I haven't seen either. So just for the crowd, I mean, May I just touched on a bit of gamification in a community aspect, which is really touching on two of the ExO attributes in terms of, I suppose, technologies that would be built around the gamification, which is encouraging engagement of that community to help, grow, to get the momentum, to do all that sort of stuff. So what we're having this conversation for is to blend, like I've sort of alluded to here, the existing ways. Like, I'm really of the opinion that the knowledge, the masterminds can be monetized. Everyone can get paid for their knowledge. We can grow this community together as we come with the answers, and everyone can do their own thing, but hopefully that community grows to something very strong. So what Maya's going to touch on now is a couple of, I'll let you introduce it, Maya, what they are. They're a couple of business planning or community planning canvases, but over to you. Let's get stuck in.
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting model by a group called Community Canvas. This is underneath Creative Commons, meaning you can find it online, you can download it, you can use it for yourself. They have this wonderful guide for it as well. But it really, the idea of a minimal viable community, where when we establish a community and we want to actually have them work together, think through, what is the purpose? Like, why does the community exist? Think through who is the audience, who is this for, and what is our selection process? Because you don't want to just open every community free for all if you've got a specific purpose for this community. Then you're wanting to do kind of a mastermind knowledge base, kind of consulting, so this is a community for if our user persona are thought leaders, consultants, coaches, etc. So they're very specific. And then also, why does this community exist? Does that exist? And then we actually have to define like why, and as there's a higher level purpose, but also like the very just specific purpose, like why are you starting this community? And each person has their own kind of higher purpose, but also, for instance, I participate in the community of Open EXO is to actually get EXO out there in the world, right? Is to train people as coaches and then kind of basically evangelize Open EXO to the world. That's really why the purpose of the community is there. Yes, there's a higher purpose for the company and the higher purpose for EXO to actually change the world. But really what we're doing there is evangelizing Open EXO to the world. And then, values and the goals, like actual metrics, like if you're building a community, and the thing about even just building online communities, they take a lot of work. It's not just, start and invite. And yes, there's a lot of own governance and people are going to start having conversations. But, I will always ask, are conversations really a community, or is just a bunch of people having some conversations, but there's a forum? What makes a community really? Then roles, which is really important. Like, what are the roles of the different people within the communities? For instance, again, EXO has ambassadors, of coaches, consultants, and then there's like kind of a larger group of people that are just in the community, but they haven't done anything. They haven't done any of the certification. They're not taking any roles, etc. So, and rules, this is really important. The guidelines for the boundaries, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, especially with all online, things like harassment and things need to actually be there. Like zero, I would say zero tolerance for harassment. One and you're out, and then you can actually request an application to come back and say that your behavior will be better. But things like that are extremely important because you're building a community and people are trusting each other, and it's very easy to break that. Like, I've seen online WhatsApp groups explode pretty quickly because of one person, and then nobody wants to come back because they don't feel safe. So that is extremely important. Then governance, how do we make decisions? Who gets to decide what? And if that is not even decided in the inception, that's going to create, especially if you're doing a professional community, you can't just throw a DAO at people. It's not going to work. Most people are looking for, if they did not start a thing, they're looking for somebody else to lead. Like DAOs are a great idea, but in practice, they're harder to actually create. my best personal experience with DAOs is actually running political campaigns in the United States. They actually are decentralized. Yes, there is a centralized figure, which is the person you're running for office. But even when you run a president for office, every location, every district, every area have their own leaders that are actually running their own campaigns that kind of funnel into the bigger campaign. And very much they have within an agreement, within a governance system, they have kind of a carte blanche on what they can do. They get their budget, etc., but they can really run their own thing. So there are ways of doing it, but it's not a, I do not believe in the plug and play DAOs. By the way, I have a dog behind me. Plug and play. It's plug and play DAOs. I do not believe in that because of the human factor. It's like, and
there's a bit of work to get done.
Yeah,
in a few years.
Yeah, and you need admins. You need people that are actually holding that container, online, offline, whatever it is. You need to have people that's their, if you talk back to the roles and responsibilities, their role is to ignite the community all the time, to be the person that's posting all the time, to be the person that's asking questions. I mean, Dan, you're actually really good at that, but that's kind of a full-time job just to run that. So actually finding somebody that maybe a little bit younger, but their excitement is to build a community and hold it, that's a role for somebody.
Yeah.
And then, communications, simplest communication channels, what's a healthy rhythm, how do we communicate, etc. And then, this is actually higher experience, like what is the experience of onboarding and offboarding? So this is kind of the simplistic minimum viable community, which I really, really like. There's kind of a deeper one here that's like much bigger and goes through like shared experiences and rituals and content. But I think this is good enough to start. I don't think we need to go through Circulab yet, unless maybe we want to shift into it. But I think this is a really.
So there's an online version of this. They've got a
all of
portal.
Or,
yeah.
If people go to Community Canvas, it's either .org or .com. They can download the guide. It's a really lovely offering for people trying to build community.
Fantastic. I'll check that out as well. Yeah, I think that's important, as Salim and the ExO community talk about, that benevolent leader. You need, I think, a team of leadership as well. And as you alluded to, I think it's going to take, a year, 2 years, how long it might take. I think there's a lot of work being done with people like yourself, myself and Open ExO. And one of the things as well, in terms of developing an exponential organisation, whether that's a organisation or a purpose-driven movement and community like this, that's leveraging technologies, don't forget, you don't have to do it all on your own. There is existing communities like the Open ExO and like contacts like Maya that, you can condense decades into days to short track that time. And I think over the next couple of years that, these softwares, these systems, the best practices, the right leaders, the right departments that are, required with their admin roles, can really be streamlined, because there's enough noise in the world that we've got to work out our own lives, let alone running a business, and then having these distractions of what to do next with all the disruption and changes with technologies. It's going to keep on happening. I think to have that core framework is going to be fantastic when we can get to that point of having that, Maya.
Yep. Completely.
So where to next? Did you want to show that other board, or where?
I think that's a little bit overkill. There's a lot there. It's
too much.
It's its own thing, and and to just even reflect to what you said. Yeah, there's the beautiful thing about the wisdom of the crowds when it's done correctly, and when people know each other's strengths and weaknesses, is that they can pull in people as needed. This is kind of part of the attribute of the staff on demand, which again is wonderful and problematic, because knowing that you have a full-time job or full-time project for a long time feels is easier than just being staff on demand. But if people are able to do either full-time or almost full-time job and then advise on the side as staff on demand, that's something I'm working towards, where I want to have one or two very main projects, and then like side advisory that supports kind of a nice like full-time employment. So I think that's kind of, again, like a positive and a negative. And I've actually, one of my previous startups, we built basically an EXO, and we had staff on demand, very specific. And it's not an easy thing. Like, and we see it with the gig economy that's kind of falling apart right now because of COVID. So there is a promise of staff on demand, but there's also a huge dark side to it. So being really, again, depending on, especially with the professional services, staff on demand needs to be paid a lot of money. So, like double and triple of a regular hourly salary. I don't think it's a healthy thing for people to think that because of staff in demand, you can pay them less, because they're all are independent people. So they're actually need to pay more. Like they have to pay their own payroll sometimes, have to pay, their own electricity and internet and all these things. So, when you factor in staff in demand, it's actually not a lower per hour engagement.
Yeah. And one of the things in my messages, I think, that I'll find my voice on very soon is for entrepreneurs, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and even professionals to aim higher. I mean, Tony Robbins talks about people having success in their business, even billionaires, and then they get bored. It might last 6 weeks, it might last 6 months, but if you've got X amount that you've achieved, I mean, what's next? And there's definitely lots of interesting stuff and opportunities coming up. So I think, for people to aim higher, and what I'm alluding to is, I think if we could maybe now focus on that, what's going to attract those people in terms of that massive transformative purpose, focus on that top left section in that canvas board. And then probably attached to that, you made a very good point, and this is why I've sort of had the epiphanies about the masterminds, is to have all the people around myself that I can have it for access for what I'm doing, but then enable that as a platform for other entrepreneurs to tap into that collective wisdom. And then, some of the stuff you might have seen last week on the planning board, things like Slice and Pie, the revenue sharing, they might have an hourly rate of $300 an hour as an AI or community expert or whatever it might be. And then if you've got that strong MTP and they're going to be part of that, then people, the reason to have that MTP is because you can keep some of these costs minimal, because I think in the Exponential Organizations book, what is it, about 98 or 99% of the AI experts end up at Facebook, Google, or I think it was Amazon. So it doesn't leave much of a talent pool for the sort of applications that any business needs to sort of build. So, interested to hear sort of your summary on that MTP, the purpose, that blend between, the freemium and the paid and contribution. And then maybe that's a good segue into to finish this up, talking about your work with the circular economy on a broader aspect.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remarked to my husband today that the best minds of our generations are working on selling us more stuff, and instead of the leading AI, leading smart people in the world actually working on solutions for our biggest problems, they're working on, product, and how do we squeeze in another dollar, another amount of money from each algorithm, and how do we get more eyeballs on some product that we don't need. And it's actually really sad, and I've seen that as something that does happen to a lot of these men and women, that when they get to a certain level and they get a certain amount of money, they look around and they ask themselves, what have I done? And actually, in Silicon Valley, there's a big kind of waking up to what people have done. There's the movie, The Social Dilemma, where a lot of the people who have actually developed these algorithms are now going, what did we do? And it's happening in other places, in other industries as well. And there's also a moment in a lot, you see it, people exit from a company, from a startup, they get a bunch of money, and then they either become VCs, or a lot of them are going into impact. And just, kind of a signal and a trend is that ESGs are the most profitable and highest return on investment ETFs right now. So, people are looking at more impact. There is these huge trends. And I mentioned just before we got online, the last 24 hours, like there's huge trend lines, one from the United States, like where the biggest car industry, this is from Uber, Lyft to all the car industry people, are basically created this committee to transition to 100% electric vehicles from every size. So they're kind of looking at from like the, small kind of shared mobility, bikes, etc., to freights. So they're kind of doing that. And on the other side of the world, in Europe, the European Commission or a bunch of European groups have actually turned to the 38 most polluting companies there, from BP to BMW, and say our financial advisors that actually hold $9 trillion of investment, saying you have to change the way you invest. So the impact, and before it was like young people getting excited about sustainability and green. It's not like that anymore. This is actually big business. This is actually where all the investments are now have to show that they have sustainability and corporate sustainability and responsibility and impact, and not just have it as a lovely purpose, as an idea, but something that they're actually looked at in their financial statements, in the annual report. They actually have to show the metrics that they're actually doing this. So I think that we're away from the times where just having a nice purpose is a nice to have. That was 10 years ago. Now it's like, how is your purpose aligned with actually what you're doing? And if you're not doing that, you're 10 years behind, you're 20 years behind. You're not actually working in the 21st century, even though you think you are. So I think that's actually a very important trend line to understand. And forgot the guy that I just saw a lecture from, but he's like the world leader in kind of impact investment capital in the world. And was exactly the question I asked him. Is like, no, you can't just have purpose anymore. It doesn't work. It's nice to have, but if it's not connected to metrics, it doesn't mean anything.
Metrics and results, 100%. It's all that matters. It's, So I'm keen to, if you can, talk about that, the cool things you said, the trust and accountability. And I can't remember if you've got a name for it, but remember your really cool looking flower that looks like the Unified Purpose logo sort of thing?
Oh, which one? Sorry. When I talked about the RACI model, that was one thing, but which
it was, remember, it's a flower looking thing and it's got all the colors on it. And we talked about it back when we were doing this. I think you might have showcased it on the last interview as well.
Could be was that the intersectional model?
Yeah.
So the intersectional model, and this is some of the side volunteering work that I do actually with the IEEE ethically aligned design. They're a group underneath the IEEE, which is International recognized organization for electrical engineers. And they're looking at ethics in AI, NAS, and the development of AI and AS. And now I've just become the co-chair of their diversity and inclusion committee. And that intersectional conversation is also how are we, when we build communities, when we build businesses, how we're actually bringing that concept of intersectionality into our work in a way that's healthy. So we're not like waving our fingers, but we're actually creating an environment and a system and an ecosystem for diversity and inclusion to actually be part of it, because actually that creates much more innovation. So there's actually a business case for why bringing in diversity and inclusion. It's actually been proven in every mark that the more diverse and inclusive a group is, the more innovative it is. So again, great business acumen is to bring that in.
100%. Yeah. Well, look, I think for the purpose of today, we can keep this short and sweet, and we're going to be having more conversations, as you know. So I think for today, that's been a good introduction for anyone that maybe, I'm sure there's some gold nuggets in there for some entrepreneurs, some business people that are watching this. As I said earlier, I'll be launching, scheduling some dates for the ExO Masterminds. So keen to start getting some collaborations happening and some group conversations again around those 11 major attributes. And I'll work on that canvas that you've provided. Thank you very much for that, Maya.
Mm-hmm.
From my end, I think, we're just going to be having many more conversations. So we don't need to carry on today unless you've got any last nuggets, Maya. Any last final comments?
Any last nuggets? It's good to, before rushing into building community and building stuff. And I'm always advising startups, crawl before you walk before you run. Like, think through things. Don't just, throw everything against the wall and see what works, because you're going to burn out your team. I'm also, in these times, I'm very much against the unicorn idea for startups and much more about the zebras. That's the last idea. There's actually a group of people called the zebras, because zebras are social animals. They work well together, and they're amazing, and they're actually real. And when we build companies, we want those kind of companies versus the unicorns that don't exist and are very rare. So that would be kind of my last nugget.
I think that's one of the things when I've struggled with the undertaking of this project and looking at this, keeping a simple model, say, for example, with the sales funnels, marketing and masterminds I've been working on. But, as Peter Diamandis says in the book, start big, aim big, but start small.
Exactly.
So I think for anyone listening, this is the power in those collective masterminds and revenue sharing models. So keen to work out some of those financials. So again, that really blends in what's happening today to where we need to get to in the future. So thank you very much, Maya. I look forward to carrying on with the conversation. And for anyone else, we'll be answering questions on the chat and look forward to sharing more with you soon. And thank you very much for your time, Maya.